After the conclusion of the Battle of Kursk in 1943, the Soviets set out to develop new heavy tanks for both the short and long term. The program was divided into two major paths: a minor upgrade of the IS-2 and a deeper, more extensive modernization for this tank. Several factories were involved with the program, most notably Experimental Plant No. 100, which began work in the spring of 1944 on a major IS-2 upgrade. This design featured heavily angled armour intended to improve protection without compromising the tank's mobility. Their work led to the development of Objects 252 and 253, later known as the IS-6, by autumn 1944. However, despite undergoing numerous trials, the projects were cancelled, as ChKZ's IS-3 and IS-4 programs were already chosen for further development, rendering the troublesome IS-6 unnecessary.
If you're passionate about armored history like we are, then you'll want to check out Steel Aces, a new free-to-play tank MMO that's taking a fresh approach to the genre. Unlike some other games, Steel Aces is built entirely around fairness. There are no pay-to-win mechanics, and success on the battlefield comes down to skill and tactics, not your wallet. The game lets you explore over a century of armored warfare, from some of the very first tanks all the way to modern main battle tanks. With vehicles from more than 40 countries and a planned roster of over 1,000 armored vehicles, including tanks, tracked and wheeled fighting vehicles, Steel Aces aims to give players access to a huge and historically rich lineup, without resorting to fake or imaginary designs. The focus is on historical authenticity and balanced gameplay, no asymmetrical mechanics like artillery or aircraft, no pay-to-win premium ammunition or overpowered premium tanks, and no loot boxes. The game will feature multiple game modes, from arcade battles with hit points to realistic and simulator modes with story-driven missions, so there's something for everyone. The team behind Steel Aces is small and independent, free from profit-driven publishers and able to make the right choices to build a great game. And on a personal note, we've been following the development from the very beginning and had fun in some of the earliest tests. The game is evolving at a rapid pace, so don't miss out on giving your vital feedback to the devs, and they do actually listen to it. If you're interested in a grounded, historically rich tank MMO focused purely on tactical ground combat, then Steel Aces is well worth a look. It's free to play, and there's even a Kickstarter campaign supporting its development. You'll find all the details linked in the description below.
Just before the battle, the Wehrmacht introduced a variety of new and potent armoured fighting vehicles, including the Panzer V Panther, Panzer VI Tiger, and the heavy Panzer Jäger Ferdinand. These tanks were heavily armoured and had powerful 75 or 88mm guns. While the Soviets had introduced the IS heavy tank into service in September of 1943, its firepower was not yet sufficient to combat these tanks. Consequently, the IS tank was modified with the 122mm D25T gun and adopted into service in October 1943 as the IS-2. By November 1943, the GAB-2, Main Directorate of Armoured Forces, laid down the technical requirements for a new generation of heavy tanks, intended to replace the IS-2. The new tank was to weigh 55 to 56 tons, be armed with a 122 or 152mm gun, have a crew of 5 and frontal hull armour of 200mm, hull side armour of 160mm, and turret armour of 160mm. In terms of propulsion, it was to use an 800 to 1000 horsepower engine, allowing the tank to reach a top speed of 35 km an hour. In March of 1944, the technical requirements were adjusted. The new heavy tank was to be armed with a 122mm gun, equipped with a more powerful engine capable of raising the top speed to 40 km an hour, and protected with armour sufficient to withstand German 75mm and 88mm guns. Additionally, two types of transmission, mechanical and electromechanical, were to be tested. While the Kirov-Chelyabinsk plant, ChKZ, worked on Object 701 to meet these demands, Experimental Plant No. 100, together with engineers from the Central Research Institute No. 48, collaborated on developing a new heavy tank for the GAB-2. The first drafts produced at Plant No. 100 envisioned a 46 to 47 ton tank armed with either the 100mm D10 or the 122mm D25T. Secondary armament consisted of a 7.62mm GVG machine gun. Although the design was largely based on the IS-2, the hull was completely reworked into a more UFO-like shape, similar to the much later Object 907 and Object 279, presenting steeply sloped 120mm armour from most relevant angles. Another notable feature was the use of large diameter road wheels. The turret was redesigned and bolstered to 150mm thick cast armour. Plant No. 100 then constructed two scale models of its proposals, one featuring the originally envisioned complex rounded hull, and another with a simplified design where the upper glacis was divided into three angled plates. The proposed top speed of 50 km an hour indicated that a significantly more powerful engine was planned. Development of Plant No. 100's heavy tanks was carried out under strict secrecy, both to guard against espionage and to conceal the project from ChKZ, which was simultaneously working on the Object 701 prototypes. This secrecy led to a peculiar incident in April 1944, when a Guards engineer colonel noticed a guarded room he was forbidden to enter. He was told by the Guards that only Khotin's personal authorization would grant access, while factory engineers claimed it was simply their smoking room. Outraged, the colonel sent a letter to Engineer Major General Afonin of the GAB-2 describing the situation. The incident sparked significant controversy, deepening the mistrust and tension between Plant No. 100 and ChKZ. By this point, both factories were working on heavy tank designs completely independently, with the GAB-2 supporting both efforts. In May 1944, the No. 100 tank design received the index IS-6 and had already evolved far beyond a simple modernization of the IS-2. The project was split into two distinct models: Object 252, equipped with a mechanical transmission, and Object 253, featuring an electromechanical transmission. In June 1944, development of both prototypes was approved. Object 252 had a planned weight of 48 tons, while Object 253 was set at 50 tons. Both tanks were to be armed with a 122mm gun, with a planned rate of fire of 4 to 6 rounds per minute. They were expected to be immune to German 88mm guns and powered by either the V11U or V12 diesel engines, giving a projected top speed of 40 km an hour. To speed up development and production, IS-2 components were to be reused wherever possible. By the 1st of July 1944, blueprints and documentation for the hull and turret were to be completed and submitted to Uralmazavod, UZTM, in what is now Yekaterinburg. UZTM, possessing far greater production capacity than Plant No. 100, which served primarily as a research and development facility, was tasked with constructing and testing the prototypes. To test the armour layout of the IS-6, two special test beds were created at UZTM, which would imitate the hull armour layout of the IS-6. The test beds differed only in welding and armour plate joining technique, as this area was a big problem on several Soviet tanks. Ballistic trials of these constructions were held in September 1944 at Plant No. 9 in the Sverdlovsk region, using German 105mm and 88mm guns firing armour-piercing rounds, as well as Soviet 85mm guns and other weapons of smaller calibers. The report written after the trials concluded stated the test beds were mostly immune to the German 105mm gun and Soviet 85mm gun. However, in both models, the weldings failed and no solution was deemed superior to the other. A third mock-up was then built and tested in December 1944. It was a combination of the previous two models. However, the armour plates failed even quicker and the welds cracked sooner, causing the trials to end prematurely. Technical drawings and documentation for the IS-6 were ready by the end of August 1944, and a full-size wooden mock-up was built, equipped with the V12 engine and BL-13 122mm gun. To test the viability of the new large-diameter road wheels, the Object 244 had its road wheels replaced with the new wheels, with the exception of the last one due to the size mismatch. Trials were held between August and October, during which the tank travelled 1,875 kilometres, much of it while carrying extra weight to approximate the mass of the IS-6. The wheels themselves were noted to be fine, however bolts would loosen, leading to cracks in the wheels, with the largest being 35 centimeters. Production of the first IS-6 prototype, the Object 252, began in late September 1944 at UZTM, and the hull and turret were sent to Plant No. 100 in October for assembly. On the 8th of November, the hull was complete and trials were held until the 10th of November. During this period, the tank drove 319 kilometers, of which 219 kilometers were on paved roads and 100 kilometers on cobblestone roads. The average speed on asphalt roads was 21 kilometers an hour and 16 kilometers an hour on cobblestone roads. Already at this stage, several design issues were identified, including an excessively heavy clutch and a gearbox that was prone to overheating. The turret hatches were also found to be too small, and the driver's hatch offered poor visibility when opened. The most serious problem, however, was the new large-diameter road wheels, which wore out far too quickly. Their operational life was only about 200 to 300 kilometers, and 14 had to be replaced over the course of the trials. To address the problem of the failing road wheels, a new concave design had to be introduced. Lastly, the 480-litre fuel tanks provided only 100 to 120 kilometers of operational range. Due to the secretive nature of Object 253, documentation is scarce, and significant gaps remain regarding the details of its construction. Component production began in October 1944 at UZTM, but the exact date of the prototype's completion is unknown. Russian author M. Kolomits claims the prototype was finished by November 1944, whereas Soviet historian Yuri Pashalok argues it was originally scheduled for completion in early 1945, noting that no Plant No. 100 records mention the vehicle in December 1944 or during the first 2 months of 1945. According to the memoirs of chief designer Krasavsky, during the factory trials of Object 253, the tank caught fire after just 10 kilometers, causing the driver to lose control. It was noted, however, that despite the increased weight from the electromechanical transmission, the tank's mobility remained comparable to that of the IS-2. Following this incident, the IS-6 project was cancelled, and Object 252 was also rejected by the authorities due to its troublesome trials and overall inferiority to ChKZ's Object 701 and Object 703. The general layout of Object 252 was typical of Soviet heavy tanks, with the driver positioned at the front, the fighting compartment and turret in the centre, and the engine and final drive located at the rear. The hull sides were sharply angled and carried marker lights, tools, and optionally spare fuel tanks. As with the front of the hull, the rear was composed of 3 angled armoured plates. 2 hatches were installed on the sloped rear plate to allow engine access and maintenance. On the Object 252 mock-up, 2 small fuel tanks were mounted on the rear hatch, though these do not appear to have been fitted to the actual prototype. The running gear of the Object 252 consisted of 6 large road wheels per side, with the idler and sprocket remaining the same as on the IS-2. The advantage of this layout was that there was no need for return rollers. For added protection, thin side skirts were installed along the length of the hull. Object 252 used 90 track links per side, each 720mm wide. Although Object 253 was intended to be externally identical to Object 252, several changes were introduced on the prototype. Most notably, it used standard IS series road wheels, likely because the large diameter wheels tested on the Object 252 proved too fragile during trials. The turret of both vehicles was constructed from 2 main cast segments, an upper and a lower section, forming a shape similar to the IS-2's turret. Handrails were mounted along the sides and rear, and 2 machine gun ports were added to the sidewalls. On the turret roof, there were 2 service hatches for the crew and a ventilator for the fighting compartment, but a proper cupola was never installed. The drivers sat at the front of the hull, operating the tank with tillers and pedals. he used a single forward-mounted Mk4 periscope that protruded through the sloped frontal armour plate, with his entry and exit hatch positioned just below it. An emergency escape hatch was also located beneath his seat in the hull floor. The rest of the crew's positions were very standard for a Soviet tank. The gunner sat to the left of the gun, the commander behind him, and the loader on the opposite side, on the right side of the gun. Both the commander and loader had their own service hatches. However, the commander had two Mk4 periscopes as opposed to the loader's single periscope. The gunner also had an Mk4 periscope mounted in the turret roof. The commander was tasked with operating the 10R radio located in the rear of the turret. The loader, besides being tasked with loading the main gun, also loaded the coaxial machine gun and operated the anti-aircraft Dushka mounted on top of his hatch. The tank was equipped with a TPU-4 bis intercom. The main gun intended for the IS-6 remained somewhat of a mystery. Initially, the 122mm D30 was proposed, which was a modified variant of the D25T used on the IS-2. The key improvements included the addition of a gun rammer and a compressed air fume extractor. However, early blueprints of Object 252 show the newer 122mm BL-13 instead, which also featured an automatic rammer and a bore evacuator. This gun is believed to have been capable of firing up to 8 rounds per minute, though some sources claim as many as 12. Despite these plans, the IS-6 prototype, built and tested at the end of 1944, appears to have been fitted with a standard 122mm D25T. This was probably done due to the lack of a BL-13 gun to mount. The vehicle carried 30 two-piece rounds for the main gun. Elevation ranged from -3 degrees to +20 degrees, providing a direct fire range of about 5 kilometers and an indirect fire range of up to 13 kilometers. Secondary armament was a coaxial 7.62mm GVT machine gun and a roof-mounted anti-aircraft 12.7mm Dushka. Inside the tank there were 500 12.7mm rounds and 1,200 7.62mm rounds. The IS-6 was very well armoured, featuring 120mm of upper frontal armour angled at 65 degrees from vertical and a 120mm lower glacis angled at 35 degrees. The side armour was 100mm thick and sloped at 45 degrees. The lower side and rear plates were 50 to 60mm thick, while the roof and belly armour ranged from 20 to 30mm. The cast turret was thickest at 150mm at the front, tapering to about 100mm along the sides and rear, sloped at roughly 25 degrees. The turret roof was 30mm thick and welded into place. The IS-6 was powered by a V12 turbocharged diesel engine producing 700 horsepower. Inside the engine compartment, oil and fuel tanks were positioned on either side of the engine, with the fuel tanks providing a total capacity of 640 litres. In the second half of November 1944, Plant No. 100 developed a minor upgrade for Object 252, a Pike nose armour layout designed by V.I. Tarotko, one of the earliest uses of this layout on a Soviet tank. With the redesigned front, the driver's position was adjusted to provide more space between the frontal plates, and his hatch was moved directly above him. Today, this tank is commonly known as the Object 252U, with the U likely coming from the Russian word ulyuchevy for improved. Although based on archived documents and drawings, the name is likely to be a modern fabrication to differentiate between it and the Object 252. The Object 252 prototype and the documentation for the improved Object 252U were sent to Moscow for evaluation at Kotin's direction. However, the IS-6 was quickly dropped in favour of Object 703, which would soon enter service as the IS-3, and Object 252 was returned to Chelyabinsk. Despite the IS-6 being rejected, Plant No. 100 kept on improving and testing the IS-6 in the first months of 1945, until they themselves also gave up on it. The improved Object 252 largely kept many design features of the original, most notably the very low-profile turret and 6 large-diameter road wheels. The most significant changes were made to the hull, with the entire frontal section being redesigned. A large pentagonal lower plate met 2 sharply angled upper plates to form the tank's new pike nose. The driver's position was placed beneath these 2 plates, with his periscope and service hatch located directly under the gun, making entry and exit difficult or even impossible when the gun was facing forward. The side armour was also revised. The upper plates were steeply angled inward, while the lower plates sloped downward before meeting the flat side sections above the running gear. The turret was modified as well, with a widened base that allowed the side walls to be sloped even further for better protection. The rear of the turret, instead of being a simple curve, was divided into 2 angled plates, giving it a heptagonal shape. On top of the turret were the ventilation fan and 2 service hatches, one for the loader and gunner and one for the commander. Small arms firing ports and handrails for infantry were added to the turret sides. Only the rear portion of the hull remained unchanged from the original Object 252. Since the improved version placed such a strong emphasis on protection, crew comfort and ergonomics were heavily compromised. The crew compartment was mostly the same as in the original IS-6, except for the driver's position. The commander still lacked a proper cupola and instead relied on just 2 periscopes mounted on his hatch, one facing forward and the other to the rear, leaving him nearly blind when buttoned up. As on the IS-6, he was also responsible for operating the radio. The loader faced significant challenges when working with the BL-13 main gun. Because the propellant cases were stored in the hull, he had to step off his seat and lift them up to the breech. With no rotating turret basket, the turret crew either sat on seats attached to the turret or stood on the hull floor and moved with the turret as it traversed. The loader also appears to have been responsible for operating the Dushka heavy machine gun, and may have been tasked with the loading of the coaxial machine gun as well. The main focus of the upgrade was to increase the IS-6's armour protection. The lower glacis was 120mm thick, but sharply angled at 28 degrees, while the 2 upper plates forming the pike nose were 100mm thick and sloped 16 degrees from the sides. This layout significantly improved the effective armour thickness. The rest of the hull remained the same as on the IS-6. The large diameter road wheels were redesigned again, now increased to 800mm in diameter and reinforced with ribs, essentially becoming enlarged IS series wheels. These were installed on Object 244 in December 1944, which then covered 698 kilometers between December 1944 and January 1945. The 122mm BL-13 gun, developed alongside the IS-6, was also trialled on Object 244 in 1945. The improved Object 252 itself was never built, remaining only in factory blueprints and later in online video games as an overpowered premium vehicle. Both Object 252 and Object 253 were eventually scrapped sometime after the war, although the exact date is unknown. This most likely occurred in 1949, when all Soviet heavy tanks over 50 tons were officially cancelled. Yet neither the IS-6 nor its upgraded form were in vain. Besides the groundbreaking use of the pike nose onto future Soviet heavy tanks, the IS-7 would be largely based upon the Object 252U. Development began in spring of 1945 under the index Object 257, and it maintained the turret and upper hull layout of the Object 252U, albeit with a few changes. Perhaps the most important change was the new diamond-shaped hull, which involved angling the 2 side plates into a V, significantly increasing the side protection, at the cost of internal volume, leading to the development of externally mounted suspension bogies, inspired from the ones on the Sherman tank. Due to the constraints of the design, the layout was altered in autumn 1945 to still fit torsion bars, leading to the long and convoluted development of the IS-7, the heaviest Soviet tank ever built. That concludes our video article on the Soviet IS-6 heavy tanks. Do you think the Soviets made the right decision by choosing the IS-3 and IS-4 instead? Or were all heavy tank projects a waste of resources from the very beginning? Let us know in the comments below. As always, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Dave Shuford, Sopwith21, Dan Fitzpatrick, Owen M, and R. Rob. Your generous contributions help fund our research, illustrations, and video production. Until next time, keep us in your sights.